Hello, welcome to my tutorial on the Guadalupe bag by Shamballa Bags. This is a lovely bag that's being given as a free gift to all of Shamballa Bag group members. It's very nice design, very simple to make, yet very stylish. And the bag pattern comes with magnetic snap closure instructions, but I have actually made it with a recessed zipper. So this tutorial shows you how to insert a recessed zipper. So without further ado, we'll get on with the tutorial. I hope you enjoy it. Happy stitching. To begin with, I'll run through some bits and pieces that we're using. So on my exterior fabric, I've made the zipper facing for the lining. I've cut out the bottom and the straps, the exterior main panel contrast band, that's for the bottom. So that's all the black, and then I'm also using red for, I can't think what piece it's for. I didn't add the, well, it's for the middle piece, which name escapes me at the moment. So I'll have the black contrast band at the bottom, then the red, and then we've got the exterior main panel, which I'm using this fabric for, which is the top. So to show you, this is how it will be. I'm making a slip pocket which isn't part of the pattern, and I've done that as 13 inches long and 10.5 inches wide, so that finished it will be 10 inches wide and 6 inches high. I've also got the pocket piece for the zipper pocket on the inside, and then I wanted to talk to you about the lining contrast band and the lining main panel. Now I'm doing a recessed zip for this bag, and if you add it to the pieces that are for the pattern, you'll find the recessed zip is too low in the bag. It's just too low. So I've given it a little hack, and what I did was I got my lining contrast band pattern pieces and I cut 1 inch off the bottom. This is the easiest way to show you how to do it. I mean, I didn't actually do it this way, but I realised I needed to show you how to do it, so I did it sort of by measurements. But if you cut this off, 1 inch off, then get your lining main panel piece and attach it to the top. It's that easy. That's all you've got to do in order to get the sizes for the recessed zipper. So I've got my pattern piece here, which is 1 inch higher than normal, and the lining contrast band, which is 1 inch shorter, or like less deep, and that's the only difference. And then when it will come together, it'll be like that. So it's very easy to do. So for the recessed zip, your fabric of choice, I'm using vinyl for the top. I could have pattern matched with this, but I want it to be a bit of a sturdier zip than it would be if it was just cotton. So I've cut 2 pieces of vinyl for the exterior and 2 pieces of lining. Now you might think, why am I using black lining when I've used red lining for the interior? Well, you won't really see it when you undo it. It will fall inside, and I wanted to match with this so that there was no obvious places where the red could slightly show on the exterior. That's why I'm using it. Now the pattern pieces I've cut are 1.5 inches in depth and 8.5 inches in length. That's all 4 pieces, the lining and the exterior. So 8.5 long, 1.5 inches high. So they're cut, and I've also cut the zip. Now it's up to you what length zip you want, but I'm starting with quite a long one of 18 inches, and I can trim off the ends as and when I want to. I can just decide what length I want. So that's the exterior number 5 zip. I've also cut my foam, bearing in mind I wanted to cut it to fit the exterior. Now I never fuse my foam. I never fuse it, and I always cut my foam to the size of the main panel piece, because I like to sew it in and then trim it out of the seams. You have to trim it out, otherwise it'll be too bulky. I've already had this cut from the last pattern, so I know the size I'm going to need, but wait until you've put the main panel piece together and then use that piece to measure your foam. And then what we do is just base stitch it in at the sides so that it's ready. And I've cut out my foam interfacing for the bottom. So this is for the bottom of the bag, which I did use the pattern piece for, because you need it to be smaller. And the bag feet I'm using will anchor this in as well. So that's all the pattern pieces. Hardware, I've got my 4 connectors. It's up to you what you use, of course. I've got my bag feet. I'm using screw-in bag feet for this one. And I always add washers on the inside. So I have my bag foot on the outside and then these on the inside. It just gives a sort of better foundation as such. Now, I buy these washers. They're 15mm across with a 5mm hole. 4mm would be fine. And I buy them in bulk from Amazon. A pack of 50 for £4 something, I believe, or £3 something. They're very cheap. And that's what I use. I use these for a lot. I use in mainly bag feet. If I'm using this style, I also use it for these, just to give it that anchor. So they are, just look for 15mm washers, and just make sure that the hole will be 4 to 5mm, and you don't want it to be too big, so that it's easy to find them. So that's them. I've got my 8-inch, or it's actually 9-inch at the moment, number 3 zip for the zipper pocket. I've got my rivets, and I've already made a tassel. I will confess I was making a tutorial for this and it was all going swimmingly until I realised I hadn't pressed record. I thought I had and it didn't take, so it was paused the whole time I made it. So I will have to remake the video on how to make this tassel. But I lined it with this fabric. So yeah, so that's my tassel made in addition to everything else. So that's all the pattern pieces, materials that we need. I've also interfaced the cotton fabrics with the Shapeflex SF101, which is my go-to stabiliser interfacing, which I love. And I've got my black thread in one machine and red thread in another machine ready to go. So without further ado, we shall begin. To begin with, I'm going to make the recessed zip piece. So we get our zip, and what you need to do is mark at the open end 1/2 inch down. I use my Clover chalk pen for this. So both sides 1/2 inch down. And then I've got my glue ready, my Guttaman HT2 glue. And at the line, you need to fold the zip back. And then bring this tooth part round to the top. I'm just going to zoom in. So you fold it down at the line, bring this round like so. I shall zoom back out, and then I just get my glue and I go in on both parts at the back. So it's like that. And I get my Clover clips, or well, any clips, doesn't have to be by Clover, to hold them down. And I do exactly the same on the other side. And I pop my glue in place, which is really pouring out. I squeeze out any excess and make a right mess of my fingers. And just use some piece of fabric to get rid of that. So it really leaked out, so I'm just going to put the lid on that, stop that happening further. And then again, fold down and then meet and clip in place. And that really doesn't take long to dry. And then do the zip up just to make sure that they match. So I'm just going to leave that to dry for 5 minutes and come back. With the pattern pieces, we just need to mark on the backs 1/4 inch from one edge. And then we get some double-sided tape. Like so. And if you're not very sure about folding it on that line because you can't see it so well, what you can do is mark a line 1/2 inch from the edge, and that way you can fold to the line instead. So remove the double-sided tape and then bring the edge up so you're folding 1/4 inch over. Like so. And we also do the same with our lining piece. I'm not going to mess about, I'll just mark 1/2 inch up from the edge. It's more to measure for the where to put the double-sided tape, but if you put it along the very edge, you'll be okay. Like so. Again, fold to the line. Like so. So you've got 4 pieces all with one end, just one end on each piece folded over. Okay, these have dried now, so I've been able to take the clips off, and we get one piece of our external fabric. We've got the folded part at this end, and we mark 1/2 inch in from the edge, the raw edge, and then we get our zip, and I'm placing some double-sided tape starting at the 1/2 inch mark that I've made, going to the end. If you wanted to and you didn't want to use double-sided tape, you could actually just hold some clips along here and then base stitch this. So what we're going to do is right side down and place along the edge like so, and like I said, you can go to the machine and base stitch this in place if you want to, at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I've done that, and now I'm going to place some more double-sided tape, but this time placing it to the end. And I'm going to move this zip pull right out of the way. And placing this piece right side down with the folded edge at this end. And I want to match up the folded edge first more than anything, to make sure that they meet exactly evenly. So these ends are even. If you look here, that's slightly over, which is why it's important to match up this edge first. And now I'm going to stitch it at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, starting at the bottom here, going up and then along and stopping at the end here. Don't stitch this part of where the folded edge is. So at 1/4 of an inch up and along. Okay, so I've stitched the raw edge along, and we just want to cut the corner and fold this out. I'm just going to put my iron on. I just like to, whoops, push the corner. Oh, more fingers and thumbs today. Okay, so there we have one part. I need to, and then we just need to press it down. Got loose threads everywhere. Like so. And then I just like to keep everything neat and tidy. So I get some double-sided tape along this bottom raw edge. And then matching up this edge first. It's the most important edge to keep neat and tidy. And then just lay the rest down. And now what we need to do is top stitch all the way along, and then base stitch along the bottom at an eighth of an inch seam allowance. So we're top stitching these three sides and then base stitching the bottom. Okay, so this is the first one made. That's the first side made. And by the way, apologies, I've got black prints everywhere, especially up my arm. We've been playing Scrabble and I've been keeping score on a pad, and I was putting my arm on it and I got it everywhere. Only what I didn't realise was I was using a permanent pen, so I'm having difficulty getting it off. So it's just a case of keep scrubbing. But yeah, so I've got tattoos at the minute, so I apologise that it doesn't look very nice. Anyway, back to the sewing. Now we once the zip pull at this end, we get the exterior piece with the fold at this end on the left, and flip the zip back down, and again as before I'm just going to mark at a ½ inch mark, and we place some more double-sided tape along this edge, and then as before place the zip like so, and then another piece of double-sided tape and then excuse me, the folded end here, this end. Oh, I've got to take the tape off, the backing off. Silly me. Oh, goodness me. Okay. Lining up the folded edges. On the length. And then as before, we go from the folded edge and stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance along the top and down the side. And again, we need to snip the corner and fold out. And then push the corner out again. And I forgot to put my iron on again, ready? Okay. And just waiting for the iron to heat up. Just to press that over. And then again we get some double-sided tape for this part. Oh goodness me, I'm all fingers and thumbs. I didn't have this trouble last time. I don't know what on earth I'm doing. That's why, the zip. Okay. And peel the backing off. And fold down to match this edge first. And then match up the rest. And again, as before, top stitch the side along the top, the side, and then base stitch along the bottom. Right, so there we have it. And if we pull to the top, there we have our nice even zip, recess zip. And once we put it into the bag, we'll cut this to the length we desire. So there we have it. That's our recessed zip. I hope you found this tutorial very helpful. Next we'll proceed with the bag that we're making. The next part we're doing is the exterior. So what we need are the 4 pieces. We've got the exterior main panel top, the exterior main panel contrast band, the exterior main panel bottom, and the bottom piece. So we've got all these, and what we need to start with is the main panel top and the contrast band. And we want to make sure that the contrast band is the right way up. So you get your pattern piece and make sure it is slightly different. I'll show you. If you look there, this is upside down and it's not right. It's slightly tapered. So making sure it's the right way up, which mine is, we now bring the top part down and line up along this edge. And I'll just use some clips to keep it in place and stop it shifting. I'm sorry if you can hear my dog whining. My husband's about to take him out for a walk, so he's being very impatient about it. Okay, and then we stitch along here at 1/4 inch seam allowance. I've stitched it together And I'm just going to turn this over, and I want to make sure that I press the seam down like so. It's not made a massive difference because it's on vinyl, but I want to stitch, top stitch along here, making sure that we're enclosing the seam allowance along the bottom. So I've top stitched along there, making sure the seam stayed flat. And now we get the bottom piece, and we need to make sure that this part is facing down. And as before, we put these together, stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then to save returning to you, I will then make sure the seam's pointing upwards and top stitch along here again. So I'll come back when all that's done. Here we have the 2 panels made, and as you can see, I've top stitched on this panel on both edges with the seam facing up and then facing down. Now what I noticed was that when I finish this, it's quite floppy, and although I'm adding foam, I don't fuse my foam, so this would stay a bit loose and floppy. So what I did was I backed it with fusible fleece, and that's given it a much better strength feel. It's just a lot better, as you can see. So if you find that you do have a very floppy panel, then perhaps try that as well. I'm just going to fuse the other piece and then we'll continue. So I've got both panels done with the fleece added, and I've also added my handmade label. So if you want to add a handmade label or any other type of label, add it now to wherever you want. I've added it 1/2 inch up and dead centre of the panel. And what I've done now is I've cut my foam, and to do that I laid this panel on my foam, drew around it and then cut it out. This is bigger than the pattern gives because Sammy's taken into account the edges and taken in at 3/8 of an inch. That's if you're fusing your foam. I don't fuse my foam, as I've said many times before. It can cause wrinkling and give a terrible look to the bag, so I won't risk it. So I base stitch it into the sides and trim it out of the seam when I've stitched the sides. I've also made it a bit shorter so I don't have to touch the top, and it'll be fine. So I just trim the seam allowance at the sides and the bottom when I do it. So I'm just going to base stitch this in. You can also add your base foam to the base, the bag bottom. I have actually, and I think I said earlier, made it smaller according to the pattern piece, because I will add this in when the bag's stitched together. I will just pop this in and then put my feet through the holes that I make to anchor this down, and that's my choice of how I added mine. So that's one way. If you want to, you can make it as big, stitch it in and cut the seam allowance out. So that's for later, and now I'm just going to base stitch this in. Now I've basted the foam on, it's time to add the markings for the connectors. So I turn them upside down for ease of seeing, and I've cut slits in the pattern piece for marking the lines for placing the connectors, and using a heat dissolvable pen. It's different colours on this pattern, so it depends on what colour the pattern is to where I mark it, what I mark it with. So that's come out okay, and I've already done that one. And then what we need to do is get our washer for our connector, which I've got here, and place that centrally along the line. So the line's there. I'll show you on the black line, actually it'll be easier for you to see. So I just line it up there like so. and mark where I want to place the holes. And then I just get my twist punch, and I actually want to place really big holes so that the screws can go right through the material. And then I'm doing it at an awkward angle, and I don't have too much strength in my hands today, so that's not going through because of the soft fabric. So what I need to do is get my rotary hole punch and do it this way. Goodness me, I've got no strength in my hands at all today. Might have to get my husband to do this for me. Oh, that's better. It's the trouble with arthritis, you just... and the reason why I don't like using this is because of the screwing everything up. Oh, so there's that. And get my curved scissors to just snip the last bit out. So you get the gist of what I'm doing. Creating the holes for the screws, but I'm not going to put the connectors on yet. So I don't put them on till later. Just want to make sure that I've cut the foam bit out as well. Yeah. Lovely. So I've made the holes, and we just need to do that with all 4 pieces, which I shall do off screen. I'm going to get my husband to do it for me and cheat. Okay, so I've cut all the holes out, and now I want to just put some of June Taylor's fray block on the holes, just to stop the fabric from fraying like crazy. I mean, it shouldn't, but I just do it as a precaution. And then the other thing I need to do is to iron the marks away so that they're not seen. Plus, it just seals the June Taylor, it dries it out, so that I know that there's not going to be any fraying. So that's the holes prepared for the connectors a little further along. Okay, now it's time to add the bottom piece. So we place that along here, and we stitch it a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then when we've done that, we need to top stitch along there. I'll come back and show you. So I've attached the bottom and top stitched and made sure that the seam was going down. And then we just need to attach the other piece to the other side of the bottom. Same again, 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then top stitch. I've stitched the bottom onto both main panels, and I've top stitched as well. So I don't know if you can see there. And I've also trimmed the foam out of the seam allowance. And now what we need to do is join both main panels together, right sides together, and we're going to stitch down the side at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So I've stitched the sides together at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and I've removed the excess foam from the seam. And what I did forget to do was mark for the feet on the bottom. So that's not the end of the world. We'll do that afterwards. I did actually find when I made one of my bags that the the markings for the feet were slightly off anyway, so I had to correct them, so it's probably better to do it afterwards. And now what we do is we open this up and we fold this flat like so, and I'm just going to hold with a clip. Open up the seam allowance. Sometimes it's good to mark the centre of the bottom to line it up with the seam, but this pattern's so good that you just get a perfect match anyway, so you don't need to worry about this pattern. And you do both sides. And for this, we're stitching at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I'll take it to the machine and stitch across both, all the way across, right across to the each edge here. So I'll show you when I come back. Apologies, I noticed as I turned it off that I wasn't showing you this bit and it was out of sight. So we're going to stitch all the way across, including across to the foam at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'll show you when I return. Okay, so I've attached the bottom, and this is why you stitch all the way across, so you get these lines like this, so it goes over, and that's on purpose. I also meant to say, when you're lining up the sides, make sure you line up the edges of the different materials, because otherwise it would look a bit awful if they're out of line. So this is the bag outer, almost done. I'm going to now mark for the feet. And what I meant about the thing earlier on is, if you'd marked earlier on and you were just out a tiny bit, it could just be sort of slightly off. It's very noticeable. So it is good to actually mark for the feet afterwards. I do have the bottom piece here that we would have used, but we don't need to use that. And you can choose where to put your feet actually, and I think I'm going to put them an inch in from the edge, each edge. So there. I'm only going to use 4 feet. It depends on the size of the bottom as to how many I use. It's a bit awkward actually. And turn it over. It was awkward doing it that way, with it being where it was. And I've sort of, the thing about not marking it beforehand, it would have been easier if it was on the flat. So I have made it a bit awkward for myself. Now, not terribly awkward, but not particularly ideal doing it this way. But I'm going to put my poly bag, the poly board inside, whilst I beg your pardon. Oh, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I really shouldn't be doing this now. I need to put the base in first so that I put holes all the way through. So I'm going to put the base in, and I shall show you once I've put it in as to what I meant about it fitting inside the seams. Right, it's a little bit big, so I'm going to trim it and I shall come back and show you. Right, that took 2 seconds. So it fits in nicely in there now. So now I'm going to screw through the base. Like so. Well, I'm going to get my husband to. And I'm just going to put 4 holes, making sure that the board's underneath so I'm not going through the other layers of fabric. I've popped back to say I'm changing the feet that I'm putting in. I'm putting these ones in that have these prongs. The reason being is I'm adding an extra item to my bottom, and the screwing feet the screws aren't very long, and I feared that I wouldn't be able to screw them in fully, making them unstable and could possibly come off. So I'm going to put these on with the washers. So this will go on the bag, then on the other side the washer, and then open them up. But I'm adding a canvas mesh plastic piece. I buy them in big sheets like this. This is a 12 pack, and these are 10.5 by 13.5 inches. And I use these, you can just cut them up to size, and they're brilliant. So they give a nice firm bottom. And let's face it, us ladies like a firm bottom, don't we? So I've cut it to size, and I'm laying it on top of the foam, like so. And now what I need to do is cut through using my craft knife, and very carefully, not cutting my fingers. So because I'm worried, I can't show you because of the angle, and I'm worried that I'll concentrate on you trying to see something and not focus on where I'm cutting and my fingers. So I'm going to go off and cut it and then return to show you. Okay, so I cut the slits in the bag and went through the layers, and then pushed the feet through, and in there you can see each one with the washer, and it's spread out. And now I've cut 4 pieces of foam that I'm going to put glue on, just to cover them so that you don't feel them when you're digging around in the bottom of the bag, and then you catch on the metal things and it doesn't feel very nice. So we just want to protect our fingertips. So I put a liberal amount of glue on. I've got them in HT2 glue. I always buy at least 5 tubes each time when I buy this. And then I'm just going to pop these over each washer, which I'll show you in a moment. Or each bag foot, should I say. Okay, so I think you can see in there what I've done. And I'm going to stitch it up, and I'm going to put something in there to weight it down, just to make sure that they really go down. Leave it to dry, and I'm going to start with the lining next. Okay, we're on to the lining now. So I've got one of my lining panels, and remember as well that we've got 1 inch higher. Now at this point in the tutorial you add your contrast band, but because we're adding a zipper, a recessed zipper, we're not doing that just yet. So I'm going to make the pocket. So I want to measure 3 inches down from the top instead of the 2. I want the measurement to be 3 inches from the top, and I just need to mark the halfway point, which is 6.5. And I've marked the halfway point on my zipper facing, which I've already made and cut out. You make it to the size mentioned in the pattern. In the tutorial, I don't want to give measurements so that people don't make the pattern going by measurements. And then I've cut a hole. I've gone half an inch margin all the way around. I've put some double-sided tape on the back. And I'm removing one side. And I'm going to put this at the halfway mark. Like so. And I just want to check that I have got the right distance on each side. So it's 3.2. 3.2, yeah, so I had to get it right. Remove the backing on the other side. And I'm going to stitch all the way around the outside edge of the box. I stitched all the way around the outside of the box, and then I turned over, I cut a line in the middle and trimmed the fabric all the way around, leaving about 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then I need to get my zip, and we put some more double-sided tape along the inner edge of the box. And I'm going to take one of the backing off, not both. Do one at a time, we don't get into a pickle. And just place to make sure that the zip goes on nice and evenly and not wonky. Okay, and then pull the backing off the bottom one. It's worth spending time to make sure you get it even, because it's very noticeable if it's off. So I do like to make sure that it's very neat and equal, like so. Turn it back over. More double-sided tape. Hey, I like to think I'm keeping this business running by buying endless amounts of tape. Right, so you need to put a strip of tape along the bottom of the zip and just slightly above the stitching, and peel the backing off. Get your zip pocket piece and then lay it face down along the edge of the tape, like so. Then take it to the machine, make sure the pocket stays upright, and stitch just along the bottom edge, just that bottom bit. I've stitched along the bottom, just along there. And now turn it back over, bring the zip pocket down and just finger press, and then get double-sided tape again and place it along the top edge of the zip within that stitching as well, like so. Pull the backing off and then bring the pocket piece up to stick on that line. Like so. And then take it to the machine, stitch up the side, along the top and down the side. Right, so finish stitching all the way round, and then I turned it over and I stitched down the edge of each side and just double check. Yep, pocket's complete. I'm going to also add my little label here. That one will be finished. And the next piece we're going to do is the slip pocket, which isn't part of the pattern. This is something that I add. I always add a slip pocket. And this one measures 10.5 inches across and 13 inches down. And I'm using my print fabric for this. And I've used 2 layers of Shapeflex SF101 interfacing, just to give a bit of a firmer feel to the fabric, so that it'll make the pocket a bit stronger. And we need to fold it in half and just finger press, and then I'm going to stitch 1/4 inch seam allowance down the side, then 1/2 inch along the bottom edge. I know it's saying at the top at the moment. So 1/4 inch down the side, 1/2 inch along the bottom edge, stop, give a few inches gap, and then carry on with 1/2 inch, then 1/4 inch up the side. The reason why I do 1/2 inch along the bottom is just gives a nicer seam to stitch and close at the end. So I've stitched down the sides and along the bottom, leaving the gap. And oh, I nearly didn't turn. I nearly forgot to trim the corners. You really need to do this because it reduces the bulk considerably. And I also do the top so that it helps that as well. So I just want to check that I've not cut into the stitching on this corner. No, I haven't. I was a bit worried then in case I'd gone too close. So we fold the pocket through now. And poke the corners out with your fingers. I always double stitch on the corners, so I go to the corner, back and then up and then back. Just reinforces those corners so that you don't tend to poke holes through them like you would with just the one layer of stitching. And once that's done, I then get my, this is a Clover tracer pen for when you're using carbon paper for tracing a pattern, like a dressmaking pattern. But this is also a great tool for pushing out the corners. It's not sharp, it's rounded, but it's quite pointed, if that makes any sense. So it does do a very nice job of poking out the corners. And then when I've done this, I'm going to press it before we put it onto the panel. Just neaten it up, and I'm going to press this seam in to make sure that that's laying nice and flat. So I shall come back when I've pressed it. So this is nicely pressed now, and I've top stitched along the top here's the gap that's nicely folded in. Still also mean if you use the 1/2 inch, it's just a lot neater than a 1/4 of an inch that would keep trying to poke out. And I looked at the pattern piece, and this is the right way up. This is actually upside down, so I want this side to be showing on the panel. And I get my pocket, my panel piece, and again 3 inches down from the top. And just measure this. That's an awkward measurement, so I'm going to fold it in half to find the centre piece and mark it, and we want 6.5 inches is the centre point, like so. And then I pin in place check that it hasn't moved at all. No. And then pins down here just to make sure the pocket doesn't shift at all. And then I'm going to stitch, let's turn it the right way up, down the sides, along the bottom and up. Then I'm going to draw a line down the centre and stitch down the centre, but I'm going to stitch 2 lines just to give it extra strength in the centre. So the slip pocket's finished. I did the double row of stitching. I don't know if you can see there or not, I hope so. It's hard to tell because it's such a little tiny screen I'm looking at. So that's both of them, nice hand size, so for your mobile phone and knickknacks. So that's the 2 lining pieces made, and it's going to be attaching them next. I'm just going to put my little label there first. Right, so everything's ready for the panels, and now we get our recessed zip piece that we made earlier and our lining contrast bands. And we start with the one side, and you decide which way you want to have it. When the bag is or in use as such, I want it to open this way so that you see my label and the zip pocket. What we want to do is sandwich the recessed zipper between the two, the lining main panel and the contrast band. So we want to make sure that this is in the centre. So I'll move the ironing pad, and I'm going to get my ruler, and that's laying that there 13 inches across, and this is actually 8, so I've got 2.5 each side. Yeah, so get my trusty double-sided tape and put it along, if I can find the edge, because I was going the other way. Goodness me. I put it along this edge here. Again, along the edge, like so. And then I'm going to place some double-sided tape the whole length of the top. I mean, you could pin it and then clip it on the vinyl part. I use this tape for speed and ease of using it. And then I'm just going to turn this round. I want to lay the contrast band along the edge as well, like so, and stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way across the top. So that's stitched across, and now open this up and make sure the seam's up, pointing upwards, like so, and just top stitch along the top here. So I've top stitched across there. So that's one side attached. And then we get our other panel. Oh, that's my phone. I need to answer that and come back. Okay, back again. Sorry about that. Okay, so this time we want to turn it round and have this part going on. So I'm just moving that out of the way, and I'm just going to put a clip on to save the zip coming off, the zip pull. It doesn't matter, it does come off, but just wanted to avoid it. And again, mark the halfway point on here. And get my ruler. And there, yeah, okay. Double-sided tape, forgot to put that on. And then place this halfway. More tape all the way along the top. Whoops. Want to make sure it's right on the edge so that it doesn't poke out of the seam. And pull this backing off, and then get the contrast band, and then we're going to stitch again at 1/4 inch seam allowance, open it up and top stitch. I shall come back when I've done it. Alright, so I've top stitched it across there, and I made sure that the seam was pointing upwards. So that's the two sides attached. And now what we need to do is stitch the panels together. So we put the seams together. We start stitching at 1/4 inch seam allowance, move to 1/2 inch, keep going all the way down at 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then as we get towards the bottom, move back into 1/4 inch. Then the other side, again, we start at 1/4 inch, move to 1/2 inch, stop, leave a gap, double stitch obviously, leave a gap, come down to the bottom, start at 1/2 inch, double stitch, and then move down into 1/4 inch again. So you're leaving a good gap of 6 or 7 or even 8 inches, which makes the bag very easy to turn. Alright, so I've stitched down the sides and I've left the gap, and I've also stitched along the bottom at 1/4 inch seam allowance. And the next thing to do is to put these together like that, open them up and make sure the seams join together. Oh, and I do apologise. Also, when you're attaching the sides, make sure that they match up in there. And also make sure you don't stitch the zip. Make sure the zip's cut out of the way. So I'm going to join at the seams so the seams match, and then we stitch across here at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I don't know if you saw that on the screen, I'm sorry. So just in case, we join there, stitch across at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance on both sides, and then I'll come back. Okay, so that's the lining finished, and what we need to do now is insert the outside exterior bag into the lining. So we have the lining wrong side out, the exterior right side out. Put the looking at the front and the the zip pocket to the back, and pop that in. Now it's always a smaller fit at the top because the bag tapers in. It's curved, so it will go. You just have to coax it in. I haven't added the connectors yet, and I know I haven't, so that is on purpose. I haven't forgotten. Right, and what we want to do now is either clip or pin, depending on what fabric you've used. I've used woven, so I can pin, making sure the seams match up. And pin together, and do the other end at the same time. And pin. And now I'm going to pin all the way round, making sure it's nice and flat and even. And once I've done that, I'm going to stitch at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way round. Okay, so I've stitched around the top, and then I've clipped notches in the curves just to help with turning and giving it a nicer result. But one thing I wanted to do was to add the connectors before I turn the bag, because it will just make it easier to gain access to the screws. So what I do is I just pop the connector inside the bag and find the holes, and just pop the screw posts through the holes. I know this sounds a really strange thing to do, but it's just the way I prefer to do it. If you prefer to add the connectors before you sew the bag together, that's entirely up to you. I just find it easier for stitching it around the top to do it this way. And it's perfectly fine doing it this way. So I add the washer, so to speak. It's a screw. And screw that in there. I don't screw it all the way. I add all the screws before I tighten them fully. And then the bottom one, you may have to sort of pull the foam a little bit to find the hole, which is fine. And this is what I do with all four. Now I tighten fully. And I go around and add all four. Then I turn the bag right side out. And when I've done that, I'll come back to you. Okay, so I've added the connectors and here they are. Look pretty, don't they? And all I need to do now, I've ironed the seam on this, so I just have to stitch it closed and push it inside, and then I'll be ready to top stitch. I'll come back when I've done that part. Apologies if you can hear music playing. My husband, bless him, is sprinkling in the kitchen, which is next door to me, and he's playing his music, and so if you hear it, apologies. So here's the bag with everything pushed inside, and the lining, I don't know if you can see in there, and the recessed zip, which isn't too high, it's a nice height. Now, as you can see, well, you probably can see, the inside is poking up above. So if I top stitch that now, it will look horrendous. I do have a video on YouTube that shows how to top stitch effectively, but I'll just briefly show you. If you make sure that you roll over the top part slightly so that you can see the exterior poking over, then put a pin through it and make sure that you go through into the foam at least, if not the exterior, which I haven't done at that point, but we go all the way round, pinning it, pulling it down and pinning it to make sure that it looks nice and neat like that edge. Once I've done that, I'm going to top stitch, and then I shall come back to you. Here she is with the connectors done, the top stitching done. So I'm happy with that, and now we just need to do the end zip and the straps. So you choose the length that you want your zip to be, and I like mine just to hang over a little bit. So that's the length I want it, and I'm just trying to find my lighter, which I think my son has borrowed. I've got to go and find my lighter. I shall be back in a jiffy. Got it. So we just do that, and then what we want to do is fold the zip round the back on itself, and we fold that and then literally slot it in and add the screw. I like to add glue as well, so I shall do that. It's just like a security blanket, just to add some glue, not too much because you don't want it spurting out all over the top, but making sure that you can see what I'm doing. Fold it round the back and again, and when you push it on, you need to make sure that this back piece goes in first, otherwise it won't want to. So you sort of put that in, then tuck that bit in, and the rest will gladly follow. And just keep pushing it down until it won't go any further. You see, so it's nicely on. Get the screw. Oops, it's because I'm doing it at a very awkward angle. There. Oh my goodness me. If I was doing it at the angle that's easy to me, it'd be that done in a second. There. Got there eventually. Oh! So you just keep screwing as far as you can, as far as it will let you. That's it, screwed in nice and flat. So that's my zip. Now if you prefer to have your zip opening at that end, you can do so, whichever end you prefer. And all that's left to do now is the strap. So I shall be back shortly with the next step for the strap. Right, so for the strap, you need to cut the size mentioned in the pattern. Again, I don't want to say it online because I don't want to give it away to people who haven't bought the pattern. But cut the length that's mentioned. And then I've got very thin vinyl, really thin, so it won't make a very strong handle or strap, shall you want to call it. So I've cut some Peltex, and I want it to be 3 inches shorter at each end to allow for the bag to be, the strap to be folded over at the end. So I'm just going to trim this down. And I've drawn a line along the centre. I'm just going to lay some double-sided tape about 1/2 centimetre or so from the centre line. Peel the tape off. And then I get the Peltex and I add it 3 inches in and just slightly away from the centre. Now the Peltex I have cut 3/4 of an inch wide. This is because if I cut it for an inch wide, it's going to be too wide for the strap, because the strap's going to be 1 inch wide. So I've cut it narrower. As you can see, I've not gone to the line. This will allow for folding. So I've done that bit, and now putting the double-sided tape to the end, I'm going along, all the way along, and I'm putting it on both sides of the centre line that I've drawn. There's a chance that parts of this will go off screen, so I'm sorry, but the strap's quite long. So it's a bit wonky. That's better. And then I peel the backing off the one side, and then I always start in the middle because it can stretch and go one way. So I start in the middle and work outwards on both sides, and I fold the side over, and it's not laying flat to the surface, but I lay it so that this edge meets the centre line. I'll just get my roller to okay, and then peel the tape off the other side, and do the same, bringing it to the centre line. Okay, and then use the roller and then I put another line of double-sided tape along one edge, not to the edge but close, because I don't want it poking out at all. Okay. And now we do the final fold, and we want to make sure that these edges meet up, so there's no overlapping. Okay, so that's the strap folded. And now we need to stitch down the edge that's folded across, all the way back up and across, and that will be our strap made. So I'm going to go and stitch that and return. Here's the strap made. I've stitched it along both edges, and I've just used some acrylic paint, leather paint for the ends. If you can see that they're black, and I used this product, which is Angel Us, yes, flat black acrylic leather paint. I usually use clear and Sharpies, but I've been noticing that I've used a lot of black vinyl, so I've treated to myself to get in black just for the black vinyl. So I've got the other strap to make, and then I'll show you how to put them on the bag. I've made both straps, and now I'm going to show you how to add them to your bag. So I've got the strap here, and personally for me, with my connectors, I'm going to measure 3.5 inches in from the edge and draw a line. And then I want to do a dot 3/8 of an inch in from the edge in the centre, and then 1/4 of an inch from that dot. So this is what I've drawn. And I get my twist punch. I got mine from Amazon for like £7. So just have a look on Amazon for twist punch and you'll find them. And I just want to put a hole where I've marked. And then I fold this to the line that I've drawn. And just use my pen to mark through the holes where I need to punch the next holes, so that they match in the right place. And just rub that mark away that I've made. And then I get my strap, and make sure, the amount of times I see people that have accidentally added their straps so that the fold is on the outside. So make sure that the strap is going the right way, she says. Do this one. Like so. And then I get my rivets, and then I use my wonderful green machine that no bag maker should be without. I could never add rivets until I got this. When I used the hand tool and the hammer, oh my goodness me, I missed more times than I got on target. So make sure that the rivet's in the hole, clamp down, and then again for the next one. like so. And that's why I said for me with my connector, because you have to make sure you've got good clearance from your connector when you add your rivets. And I'm going to do exactly the same with this side, and I shall return when it's finished. So here she is in all her glory, the Guadalupe by Shamballa Bags. I thoroughly enjoyed making this bag. Every bag I've made, I just don't get bored. It's a beautiful pattern to make. Definitely one of my favourites, if not the favourite. She's got a beautiful shape, isn't she? Say very curvaceous, and I don't tire of making her. I've added my tassel down the bottom there at the side. You don't have to add anything, but I think it's nice to add a little bag charm or a tassel each time to make your bag yours, and just to give it that little extra bling. I hope you found the recessed zipper easy to understand. Feel free to ask me questions. I'd be happy to help. If you found my tutorial helpful to make your bag, I would be grateful when you post your bag if you tell people that you used my tutorial and give them the link. I do put the link in the video description, but also there's a share button where you can get the link underneath my video on the YouTube page. But it just helps others find it, so I'd be very grateful if you did that. Anyway, I shall let you get on with your sewing. Please do post your bags in my bag group, Bag Making Addicts, or the Shamballa Bag group, or both. It's nice to see the results of what you've made. Anyway, I shall let you get on with your stitching, and I shall say happy stitching, and see you again soon. Bye.